say a few words, and then I'll do a proper introduction, and then we'll working on.
Great. Shall we just wait for a couple of minutes till we hit the start time?
Yeah, that's great, Kylie. Thank you.
I might start with a quick introduction to the Better Health Generation, and firstly, thank you to the IEP for inviting us to present this webinar. The Better Health Generation is a team of allied health professionals in Australia and in the UK. My name's Dr. Kylie Henderson. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm the founder and managing director. We're joined on the line with Andy Milne, who is our company partnership manager in the UK. But we represent a number of businesses, including Aim to Work, which specialises in assisting job seekers with health conditions back into work. Quite a in-demand organisation at the moment with the current umbrella agreement. Me and Work, which is focusing on employers and helping businesses to perform better. Many of the models that I'll be presenting today come from our thinking around organisational psychology and helping businesses to perform better. Your Health Plus, which is our digital employability and health platform. Care Squared, which is providing services to people with disabilities. Care Squared Kids is the kids version of that, and Generation Care is where we provide services, particularly mental health and physical services, to the aged care sector. We do a lot of assessments in Australia, particularly in the justice space, supporting people to get the right rehabilitation following on from a justice event. So that's a bit about the organisation. Just a little bit about me. I became a psychologist at 21, some 20 years ago. And I guess my first job as a psychologist was helping people in rehabilitation and for drugs or alcohol to return back out to the community. It was a residential facility, so everybody stayed there. We had a detox centre where people could detox from a range of different drugs or alcohol. But after 6 months of working there, I realised really quickly that the main ingredient of helping somebody to rehabilitate was work. And sadly, at the Drug and Alcohol Rehab Centre, there wasn't much that we could do to help people to get into work. Our primary role was to provide them with clinical intervention to stop them from using drugs or alcohol. So I became really interested in my early years as a clinician about the impact of work and mental health, and particularly around the impact of work and drugs and alcohol, and the barriers that some of our clients face in accessing work and accessing what I call a really good fair go. I was sadly witnessing, the reduced opportunities that vulnerable people have, and particularly around being given a fair chance to find work and to navigate their way through the system. So very early on in my career, I became interested in work and how we can support people better at work. And I've spent the last 20 years in that field doing a PhD in mental health and work, and making sure that we provide people the best opportunities to achieve their full potential. So today I'm here following on from that, I guess, keen interest that I've had for all of those years, to talk to you about how we might be able to navigate the changes that are about to happen or are certainly happening in our workforce. And as leaders in the industry, be able to support our businesses to move forward into what is the new era. So I'm really enjoying everybody chatting on the line. I want to encourage you to ask questions. We are a smaller group today, so please ask as many questions as you like. You'll notice that on the bottom menu bar, you can ask some questions there. You can, if you put them in the Q&A, you can ask them anonymously. If you put them in the chat, I'll still be able to answer them, and I'm happy to answer those questions directly at the end of tonight. I mentioned about the IEP. I'm a fellow of the IEP because I believe that the values that the IEP bring to the market are particularly important. And those are helping you to perform better in your role and helping you to network with your peers. So please continue chatting as much as you like. Say hi to people you haven't spoken to for a while, and hope you enjoy tonight's session. Hopefully you can see my screen by now. I mentioned that my objective tonight is to assist you to understand some strategies that might be able to be utilised during what I'm calling the new world or the new change that are happening as a result of COVID-19. If you signed into my webinar a couple of weeks ago, you will remember that I discussed the change curve that individuals go through around any major change in people's lives. I reflected on grief as a major change in someone's lives, but also on the fact that COVID-19 has had significant changes in everybody's lives. So we discussed how each individual would be going through these stages at different times, and likely back and forth during these different curves or moments throughout the last kind of 16 weeks. When we think about organisational change, though, it's really important to recognise that ultimately we need individuals firstly to start moving through change before the organisation can support that change process. So it's good that we started a couple of weeks ago talking about how individuals change, because once you're on that journey, it's now the role of organisations to assist you to move through to the integration phase. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight, is how do organisations or providers support this change process. So where are we at the moment in the UK? 56% of us are either furloughed, that's my Australian accent by the way, so excuse that, or being asked to work from home, or finding work from home really hard. It's really difficult to manage. It's a change, but it's also a balancing act for many of us. For those of you who are on furlough, 9% of you are saying that you're unlikely or very unlikely to return to the job that you had before the lockdown. This might not be relevant to you guys on the line tonight or on the webinar tonight, but it's certainly relevant for our job seeker population. And 11% of those people who are furloughed said they don't even know if they ever would return. So that's a good 20% of people who are accessing that financial support at the moment that may not even go back into work. And I think that that data is relevant only 5 days ago. So you can imagine the levels of anxiety in the community at the moment, based on the fact that 20% of people who are furloughed are not sure if they'll go back to work, and 56% of us are furloughed. So that's a significant proportion of the population at the moment, and the potential unemployed population that's to come. So what does the unemployment figures and what do they look like at the moment? You can see here, these statistics show that the vacancy rates in March and May have significantly dropped. You'll see back in 2008, we're almost hitting those low numbers of vacancies that were around in the recession. So when we talk about where is the labour market heading and what are the opportunities for our job seekers moving forward, they are reducing in the UK. There's no doubt about that. And there is obvious concern about a recession moving forward. So what does that mean as employment services providers? How do we adapt to this change? Not just the lockdown, but how do we adapt to, 50% of our job is actually finding employers to help our job seekers to create opportunities for them in the labour market. So it's going to become tougher and tougher. So what does the new normal mean? I think there are really 3 initial steps that we need to take as leaders in employment services. We need to firstly be aware and discover what the impacts of COVID-19 are going to have on the way that we normally operate. And many of you have already been through this process. But who in the organisation is most impacted, and in what ways are they most impacted? We need to decide on how we're going to adapt our services and workspaces. And some of you I know have already decided that, and we've got Team A and Team B working in different environments. We've got people still working from home, or some in the office and some in other locations. We need to also start doing these changes. So when we start doing these changes, I think that's when we move into the change management model. So unlike traditional organisational changes, with COVID-19, we've been forced as leaders and managers of organisations to do those first 3 steps really quickly, to discover what we need to do, to decide it really quickly, and to start doing it really quickly. And that's probably quite a big difference in normal organisational changes that might come when we see the implementation of a new IT system or some changes to the services that we might deliver to clients. The Adcount model is the most evidence-based, researched change management model that organisations would normally go through when we start thinking about a change. I'm adding to that these first 3 steps because I think we already know the change is here. I think we already know as leaders we have to change, and there's no choice about it. There's no discovery that we would normally do if we were to implement a new IT system. We might go out to our staff and start asking them questions about what's working and what's not working, and what recommendations do you have. And in this process and where we're at the moment in the new world, we've gone way past even asking. We just need to act and react very quickly. So these 3 stages for many of you may have already happened, or you're in the process of working out how and deciding where things might go from here. So the Adcount model, the most evidence-based model, as I mentioned, that means it's the most effective model, starts with an awareness of the need to change. It moves through desires to participate in change, so making sure employees or your peers have the desire to change, making sure they have the knowledge of how to change, the abilities to implement these changes, and the reinforcement of these changes. Not everyone in the organisation goes through these types of stages at the same time. Some people go back through old changes and old stages. And you can, if you recall from my previous presentation, the stages of change that an individual goes through can go up and down as well. So it's quite a complex process. But one thing I know for sure is that throughout every change, there needs to be a specific strategy that the organisation or the branch that you work at or the site that you work at has. And it's best to be an overt change strategy so that everybody knows what's happening. So what is the A about awareness? Obviously, you need to know why the change is happening. Most of us know why we're changing our work situation. But we need to be really clear about the communication and how, as an organisation, we are going to adapt to COVID-19. And that'll reduce any rumours or misinformation. So what can we do as leaders? We can increase our communication and ensure that we include the reasons why we're changing. We can check in regularly with individuals, employees and teams. And you'll see leaders throughout the world having regular weekly heads up and heads down with staff, just to give them an update on where things are at. We can ensure our communication is two-way, so we can welcome feedback from employees and get them to voice their concerns. What is it that they're worried about in relation to the new normal? What do we need to do as an organisation to support you as an individual? So obviously, I think at this stage is somewhat redundant, because I think most of us know that we need to change because of social distancing. Some of us need to be working from home. We need to be using video or telephone technology to keep in contact with our clients. But some future changes that employees may not be aware of might be around the financial constraints, the changes in our workloads, and some of the processes and methods might be changed in the way that we access employers or our local labour market opportunities. So there are still some things that we need to make sure in the change process that employees are aware of in this A of the model. So I'll get you to reflect as I move on to the next screen. Is there anything that we haven't, as an organisation, made our employees aware of, or is there anything else we have to revisit here to make sure that everybody is on the same page with their awareness around the change and the future changes that might be coming up as well as a result of the new normal that we're going through? D is around our desire. What is, do our employees desire to change? And the current barriers here might be concerns about losing their job, being out of the comfortable phases that we were in pre-COVID, changes to our home environment such as homeschooling might be quite disruptive, feeling quite disconnected could also be a barrier to someone's desire to change, and the ongoing change fatigue. So where an organisation constantly inputs changes and is constantly changing their stance on how they're going to deliver services, it can create fatigue in individual employees. So what can we do? What can we do about this as leaders? We can increase employees' desire by communicating more often with them, and we can restate the reasons why we're doing what we're going to do. We can also give employees more control and flexibility, which will help to increase their desires to change. By spending one-on-one time with each of our staff, we can also hear their concerns, listen to them, acknowledge them, and help them to move forward with those concerns. And we can ask for feedback during that one-on-one time as well. Is there anything else that would help you to move forward with this change, or anything else that you need at the moment? So the D in the change management process is really important, and it does involve quite a lot of communication, both with one-on-one employees and the teams that they're in. K is about making sure all employees and staff have knowledge. So this is about training employees so they know how to change and what's going to change. It's about the knowledge around both the transition, but also it's about making sure that we acknowledge the competencies that might need to be worked on in the new world. And a great example of that is where we've suddenly moved all of our services from face-to-face to telephone-based services. What are the new competencies that we need to train our people in to deliver our services effectively, and so that they feel competent to deliver services effectively over the phone? I don't think that's just a skill you have. Certainly we've all had to learn new technology skills in the last 16 weeks, but on top of that, there are some unique nuances in the way that we engage with clients over the phone, over video versus face-to-face. So it's really important that we provide employees that knowledge and that support so that they can feel competent in their job, because that will help them to change and be part of that change. So if you've had staff participating in some of these IEP webinars, that's a great way to help them to develop new skills. But are they the right skills to deliver your services in a new way in the new world moving forward? That's a question you need to answer. Does everybody in your team have the skills and competencies to move forward with this change? If not, we need to do something about that. And we need to provide people with learning opportunities so that they can develop and feel competent in their job. I think also we know at this point that increasing people's knowledge of how to develop resilience and how to manage stress are really important as part of the K in the knowledge stage of change management. Many of us are under extra pressures and stress, either from our partners or our relatives or our extended family. So on top of just the work changes, we've got these other underlying stressors that we need to make sure we equip our staff to have those competencies to manage that. I think it's also really important at this time that organisations give employees some time in their week that's dedicated to learning. In our organisation, once a month, we get everybody together on one day a month just to do learning and continuing professional development. But I don't think that's enough when it comes to the new changes that are occurring and constantly the goalposts are changing slightly in our business. So we might need to think about other opportunities to increase the knowledge of our people to help them to move forward. Again, it's also giving them access to the employee assistance programs, professional counselling services that might be available to support people more than just providing resilience and wellbeing training. So the A is about ability. So addressing the gap between knowledge and action. You can have all the knowledge in the world around how to manage stress, or all the knowledge in the world around how to engage with somebody over the phone, but it's about putting that into action. So this might be, some barriers here might be not having enough resources at home, or you might be overloaded with work demands, so therefore you can't adapt or change the way that you engage with people over the phone. But what can we do? What can we do as leaders about helping our employees or our staff to move forward through this stage? Certainly we can continue to monitor performance, because performance management should be about coaching. It should be about identifying on a scorecard where people sit and where they'd like to be and how we can help them to move forward. Performance management should definitely continue during this phase, and we should continue to provide positive feedback and feedback where people can develop more. Making sure that employees are practicing time management strategies, and this includes things like the to-do list. I've previously spoken about the Thrive daily to-do list that you can use, and you can access those resources through the IEP library. But these are really important to helping someone in an organisation to follow through the change processes. I think it's also relevant to update your job descriptions and competency matrix to make sure that the way that you're expecting people to perform their roles now, that those competencies are included in their jobs. So it's not just about performance reviews, it's updating job descriptions and updating the skills required to do particular jobs, because we may find that some of our employees are better suited to other roles now. And we just need to adjust and adapt those to make sure that our staff are working to their strengths. And the last one, R, is reinforcement. So how do we maintain a change? We've gone through all the stages, but we want people to stay in that maintaining stage. Although it's the final stage, it should be present mostly throughout every single of the ADKAR process. Sometimes, I guess, there are barriers to people getting here though, and employees may not be seen as doing the changes because you may not see them. They might be working from home, and it may be harder to recognise at what phase they might be sitting in. It's also difficult to know when the change process is actually finished, when there are ongoing lockdown and restriction updates. And certainly in Australia, we're now seeing a second wave. So we're kind of going back through another change that's occurring. So sometimes there are barriers to getting to this reinforcement stage, but this is a really important stage where we can really create opportunities to recognise success. So who are our most successful employees who have really adapted to change, and how can we acknowledge them and celebrate them? And how do we continue to seek feedback from employees and keep monitoring our progress towards the ongoing changes that are likely to occur for us in our businesses moving forward? Unemployment rates are likely to double in most Western countries. So our work in employment services is definitely going to change. So whilst we might think we've got to the end of the ADCAR model, I think it's a great opportunity to stop and reflect and to try to understand on a scorecard how you think you're going. If you're a leader in your site or in your organisation, how do you go against, what's your scorecard look like against each of these stages? And if you're an employee in an organisation, how's your organisation rating or how is your leader rating on a scorecard against these stages? Would you say that you got that there was a really quick discovery phase? Did they really quickly decide how they were going to deal with these current circumstances? And did they really clearly articulate that and start doing it? Did you get the A in the ADCARS model, the awareness, desire? This is where I think we're probably at in Australia and in the UK, is we've still got some opportunities to increase knowledge and to change and adapt our skill sets to more effectively perform in our roles and our organisations. And that means our abilities may need to be recognised and put into action, and we may need to continue to reinforce that. So your scorecard's really important for you and your business moving forward. So to summarise my discussions tonight, I think it's worthwhile acknowledging that individuals need to change first. They need to start that change process, and then organisations can support individuals to move through a change. And we can do that by using the ADCARS model. But my recommendation, given these totally unprecedented times, is that we start with the discover, decide and do, and stand up as leaders and start that process, articulate that process to our employees so that they know where we're moving towards. So that's about all from me. I might turn over to Helen to see if there's any questions or comments or feedback. Please feel free to add these to the Q&A or to the chat, and I'm happy to answer those. We've still got a few minutes of the webinar.
Hello, yes, it's been quite quiet on the chat today, but we find that does happen when they've got new models to look at, and it's been very interesting. So if anyone does have a question, pop it into the chat now while we still have Kylie here to ask.
No one likes to ask the psychologist a question. I shouldn't.
No.
I think it goes even further than that, Carla. I'm always wary of talking to you.
That's only after you've had a glass of wine, Scott.
I think this is a really useful model, isn't
Okay.
it? It's been a really good presentation, so we can sort of reflect and look at where we are on that journey, and I think people are thinking about the next steps that they need to take.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to also scorecard your organisation, and certainly in my preparations today for the webinar, I had the chance to reflect on how we're going as an organisation, and I feel genuinely there's a lot more that we could be doing in that knowledge, ability, and reinforcement space. So I don't think anyone gets it perfectly, and we just need to make sure that we spend our attention in each of these phases as much as possible to try to get change as good as we can get it. There's never a perfect change process that goes on.
I agree, and like you were saying earlier in the presentation, we have the knowledge and we know some of the responses, or we know what's happening and we know how to deal with stress and anxiety, but actually the ability to do it isn't always immediate, is it? So the knowledge isn't enough on its own. We have to work our way through those processes.
Dahlia's asked a good question. Have you got any suggestions for the competencies required in the new normal? Might be helpful to brainstorm. I think that, Dahlia, that's a great question. One of the examples I gave was how do we build rapport with clients over the telephone and video call when they're not coming in and we're not seeing them face to face. The second really important skill that I think we all need at the moment is how do we transition people out of occupations that are dying in the face of COVID into occupations that are growing in the space of post-COVID. So we're looking at occupations like tourism and education and aviation, which are decreasing, and now we're going to need to transition those workers into occupations that are increasing. So that's a new competency around career development, around the grief and loss associated with the previous role that somebody had, and helping them to adjust through that change process. So everything that we're learning about change, we almost need to apply to clients as well, and we need to have that expertise fairly quickly in order for people to move back into the workforce really quickly. So I think they're two really specific skills that employment consultants are going to need in the new world moving forward. Does anybody else have any idea on the chat about competencies or skills that you've had to develop in the space of the last 16 weeks that you think are really relevant to the rest of the industry? Please add it to the chat if you think you do. Zoom, Scott's saying Zoom. I had to learn webinar as well. Yes, the ICT skills of Teams. Yes, I think you're right, TJ. It's all those different methods of communication. How to adjust your speaker, how to adjust your camera, all of those things that we didn't really have to do previously. So there's lots of skills. I think the other skills I've had to ensure that our staff are familiar with is how to manage risk over the phone. So if somebody is threatening suicide or quite distressed over the phone, how do we manage that? It's a bit different when they're in front of you to if they just hang up on you and you don't know where they are. So there's absolutely some safeguarding, as Louise said, that we need to increase in our businesses. Any other skills or any other questions? Yeah, exactly. Dahlia, mapping the progress of clients. How do we know if they're moving forward? Yep, listening skills. I think too, we've spoken about it previously on some of these IEP events. We've spoken about how do we help people to thrive and be more resilient, because there's multiple pressures. So, you know, as employment consultant, that issue of stress and resilience is coming up more and more. Yeah, yes, that's right, TJ, the fears. So any other questions? I mean, we could go on. There are actually quite a lot of new skills that we've had to rely on. So that's about all from me, I think, unless Andy, Scott or Helen has anything else to add. Sadly, this is my last presentation. Hopefully Scott will ask me back for more.
Kylie, we
yes.
we definitely will. It's fantastic learning, and the response has been absolutely amazing. I can absolutely tell you that over 1,000 people have watched the first webinar again that you presented around coronavirus anxiety, and every single one of these webinars has been really well attended. If I can do so, yes, if you'll come back, we'll be really happy to have you. And it's always a pleasure to have you from the other side of the world. I don't think everyone realizes necessarily that it's nighttime in Australia, and Kylie's done a full day's work before she's come on to do these webinars for everyone. So we're very, very grateful. So I do my quick wash up, Kylie. It's really great. Thank you very much again for doing the webinar today around the new world and the new regime for providers and specialists. And I'm really grateful to Kylie and the team from the Better Health Generation for doing that. As I said to you before, if you haven't seen some of the other webinars that the Better Health Generation have done, then please head on over to the IEP YouTube channel. Please make sure that you subscribe, and that will enable you to get information on when things are made available that are new for you. Lots and lots of content. And if you're part of the IEP network, you would have seen a mailing last week around our YouTube offer and what information is there. Got some great things coming up in the next few weeks around virtual first aid, coaching, employer engagement, online learning, suicide prevention, lots and lots of stuff. And we really hope that the Better Health Generation will come back soon, because we miss them when they're not here. All of that information will be placed in the IEP Learning Network e-bulletin, which comes out every single Wednesday. So make sure you get your hands on that. And the last thing I want to say to you is stay well, stay safe. It's really great to have you chat there. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. And yeah, thanks again to Kylie and the team.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, Kylie.
Thanks, Helen.
Thank you, everybody. That's wonderful. Thank you.